Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Veeam webinar on security and ransomware capabilities. My name is Stanley, and I am the Senior SE for Channel Services in Seek. Before we start, if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions option to submit them. We will track them, and I will try to answer them before the end of the webinar. All right, let's go. So today's agenda, I'm going to cover a little bit on the product overview of Veeam Data Platform, and going to go through some of the features and functionality, some of the offerings that the Veeam Data Platform offers. And the main thing about today's webinar is about the live demo on the security and ransomware capabilities, which we announced in 12.1 version way back last year. And over time, we also have new addition that is available as of today. I also share the additional resources which you can reference to, especially in terms of ransomware stats that you can actually download from our yearly data trends and report, right? So let's move ahead with the Veeam Data Platform. So what is a Veeam Data Platform? Veeam Data Platform is actually a solution that is done by Veeam. As you can see that in the context around the solution itself, we have basically three different solutions or products, right? If you look at the first green bar, which is the backup recovery, this refers to our flagship Veeam backup and replication server solution, which is typically used by a lot of customers out there for data protection and recovery. On top of that is the monitoring and analytics option, which we bundle together with the Veeam backup and replication server in the advanced edition. The monitoring and analytics solution allows you to kind of monitor key infrastructure or backup infrastructure, virtual infrastructure, specific workloads that you think are important to monitor them, and provide some form of analytics to look at from a dashboarding standpoint. Now, on top of the typical alerts and alarms that we provide for monitoring this infrastructure, hosts or even applications, we also included new security and ransomware or malware alerting functionality in the product. Those that include in both the monitoring and analytics solution, as well as the Veeam backup and replication server. By the way, the monitoring and analytics solution is known as our Veeam One product. So you will hear a lot of talks and probably references to Veeam One. This is basically our monitoring and analytics. Now, to round up the package stack, which is our premium pack, includes recovery orchestration. So recovery orchestration is a Veeam solution that provides capabilities for providing automated recovery process and documentation for any workloads that you design to run to provide data recovery services as well as tasks in any way that should a situation happens on whatever that you're protecting. And one good example is providing the recovery aspect on, let's say, a VM on-prem, and you can actually recover it on Microsoft Azure, for example. At the bottom, you'll see a particular list of options that infrastructure that we provide data protection for, right? On the left, you'll see all the hyperscalers that includes AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, as well as Kubernetes running on-prem on the cloud that is provided by our Kasten product. Now, do note the Kasten product is a separate solution providing data protection and recovery for Kubernetes environment, but you can actually marry the same aspect on what you have on Veeam Data Platform, the backup policies and everything with the Kasten product. So besides the clouds, our original product that we designed way back in 2008 provides data backup as well as recovery on a virtual platform, right? The first product that we probably released was the VMware environment, and we have grown to include Hyper-V, as well as the HCI environment like Nutanix and so on. And this could also be running on-prem, on the cloud, or even, if solutions can actually reside on a typical platform that's supported by Veeam, we were able to protect and recover them. Now, besides the virtual infrastructure, we also provide data protection for physical hosts. This physical host could be standalone physical host. It could be Windows, it could be Linux, it could be AIX or Solaris, right? And you can deploy agents to provide data protection and recovery as well. And this purely can be managed by a Veeam backup and replication server. So besides the physical host and the virtual infrastructure, if you have a dedicated environment that supports applications like enterprise applications like SAP HANA and so on, this can also be used to protect them with integration into those enterprise applications. And of course, on the right side, we extend the ability to provide data protection and recovery for Microsoft 365 and Salesforce running on software as a service. So you heard a lot of Microsoft 365 environment that needs to be protected. So we have two solutions to do this, both for the on-prem and then one as a backup as a service, right? So these are the extensive environment that we can provide. And most of this data protection and recovery is using the native APIs that is embedded into all the solutions that we have for data protection and recovery. So today's webinar is about capabilities to counter ransomware. So this came from our data protection trends report in 2024, right? And in fact, if you see the QR code on the right, you can actually download that report, right? It gives you a perspective of what the customer actually sees from not just suffering from ransomware attacks, but what are they looking for in terms of data protection, right? What's their needs? Are they moving on towards that particular requirements to protect modern workloads, as an example? So I do encourage for everyone in the call, all right, to kind of download this report. This is a report that we do every year, and we survey close to about 1,200 customers worldwide. So what we have here is just a stats on the APJ region. So as you can see on the screen, 83% of the customers that we survey in APJ suffered some form of ransomware attacks in 2023. So how many attacks do they actually encountered? Some say that they may encounter one or more. Some say that they have never encountered it. Maybe they do not know that yet, but we want to ensure that whatever that you have in the environment can be mitigated or lowering the risk to make sure that your backup can be protected and ensure that anything randoms for malware or ransomware does not exist in your backup. And we see 29% of organizations will hit quarterly, while only 17% of the customers that we poll believe they will not hit at all. If you can look at the charts, most of the occurrence that happen for any customers that have been hit by ransomware is about 2 to probably 4 times a year. And this is not all, right? You may not know basically how a particular threat actor might be lurking around in the environment. And this is something that we want to make sure that we reinforce your security posture from a backup and data protection basis. And we normally think that in terms of the data protection piece, this is something that we want to encourage that you have and apply the same capabilities in your own environment. So in the live demo, I will switch very quickly after this. I want to show what we can do to reinforce your security posture. Right, what are the new functionality that we can use in Veeam Data Platform version 12.1, right, to manage the kind of a security posture for your backup infrastructure? How do we perform detection and identify threats there are certain parameters or settings that you can use. And of course, we also include the dashboard that I mentioned in Veeam 1 that probably can give you a perspective of what's going on in your backup infrastructure. And then how do you respond and recover to anywhere, and gives you the ability to do this while securely restoring the environment back to production. And of course, I also included a newer Splunk app that is developed by Veeam, right? That you can use to put on your Splunk enterprise environment with a stronger threat detection. Okay, so let's move on to the demo. So I hope you can see it on the screen. I'm going to enlarge my screen a little bit, right? So let's give you a perspective of a Veeam Data Platform console. So we have deployed a latest version, which is 12.1.2.172. And in the screen here, you will see the main console, a typical console that you sign on using the Veeam Data product. So the first thing that will come to mind in terms of providing security to make sure that you are aware what we can provide, to reduce the threat into your backup infrastructure, is the ability to provide capabilities for um, ensuring that no administrator or a user can probably log on to your console without proper authorization. And one of the good thing about having a multi-factor authentication, as you can see here, is that we do not, all right, we do not again leverage on the corporate multi-factor authentication, right? Usually that happens if a threat actor started to compromise your security posture on your multi-factor authentication services. For example, right, you may not have access to your backup, and that is to lose whatever that you backed up in the past. So one of the things that we included here for multi-factor authentication is to use authenticators that you can find on, in the public space, for example, like the Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticators, which we support, right? So that you can actually use them, right, with the mobile phone or any devices that you can log on to your environment. The second option that you can, control the access to the console, right, is to enable a auto lock off after certain minutes of inactivity. Now, this is also good. You don't want, and if you, let's say that a person or backup administrator decides to access to the console and he just walk off, and after 10 minutes, you're automatically locked off, and you can change the timing as you see fit. All right, pertaining to your security compliance mode for any infrastructure. We can only see that there's only one administrator here, but I want to bring out that you also can include backup operators, backup admin, and so on. Right? Why is it important to also ensure them? Because they need to sign on as their own profile. And let's say that if you are logging on as a typical administrator, like for example here, the role is a Veeam backup administrator, which is the administrator itself, and if somebody else remotely sign on using the same account, right, they will be deterred in terms of accessing the account. And of course, this will be locked, and then they will send to your events log itself, or even to your syslog or SIAM server. Okay, so that's three different security settings that you can actually do. Now, the ones that we included in 12.1 is called a four eyes authorization. Four eyes authorization requires additional approval for sensitive operations. So what are those? For example, like accidental deletion, changing of backup policy, deleting of specific backups from your repository, or even adding new users into the group requires a secondary backup administrator. This is good, right? For one thing is you have another pair of administrator or user account that will validate the action that the first person requested on, right? So if you choose that to be done, this functionality um, do help in terms of managing the expectation or accessing to your backup, but this functionality cannot protect against any threat actor with privileged access to any infrastructure so that it does not remove anything from your environment, especially if they need to destroy any backup data, which usually it does, because you know that the backup data is your last line of defense. They will cripple whatever infrastructure already in the environment, and we want to make sure that it does not get into that state. So the 4 eyes authorization gives you the ability to kind of do this, and you can automatically reject the pending approval after a certain number of days. Let's say today, if I send a request to say I want to remove one of the backup because it's already expired due to immutability status, and I want to remove it from my repository, right? If nobody responds to my request, it will automatically reject and deleted after a certain number of days, right? So this is one of the new settings that we have provided in 12.1. The second option that we normally go through for mitigating any response is malware detection settings, right? The first one is encryption detection. Right, we have an inbuilt inline scan to detect any previously unencrypted information, especially for data that's being backed up, right? Being encrypted in a certain way, all right, when we process any of these images, right? Usually that is to indicate of a ransomware attack and so on, right? So during the first run of the backup with entropy encryption detection turned on, for example, we will create a indexing aspect of all what we ever backed up. That index file will be referenced by subsequent backup so that we will monitor and detect any unencrypted or encrypted this image from the backup perspective, and we will flag it up as part of a malware detection. Now, besides processing these images, we also look at appearance of suspicious files that are being embedded into an environment. It could be a node, it could be a ransomware text, for example, embedded into a specific file, which sometimes could be, misleading by typical scanners, but it will be picked up by our suspicious activity detection option. Now, there are ways to kind of exclude this, right? Because of sensitivity level, for example, in the inline entropy analysis, we will actually move the scale according to this so that it will not generate a lot of false positives as you perform daily backup or restoration, or you import a certain database or backup, for example, from another region, from another organization into your backup infrastructure, and you can change them, right? You can exclude them. You can actually change the way that we will exclude certain files for this purpose. The second option, that the security option that we included in 12.1, is a incident API. The incident API allows you to do two things. One, we trigger a now ban backup of a particular job as soon as an external threat detection engine notifies of an infection, right? This infection can come from anywhere, right? It could be your network, it could be an application, which can trigger a quick response so that you can actually capture a good restore point before it compromises your particular environment that you're backing up, so that we actually move that restore point in a good state, and you can use them for quick recovery or fast recovery if you need to. And this incident API will be used by third-party applications, which I will share later on in another slide. Who are the vendors that basically use this incident API, right? Most of them will trigger out of band, meaning outside of Veeam, and then using the incident API to perform a quick backup on the notification. And of course, like any other solution out there or any settings in Veeam, we do have a notification, right? This is sending information to respective users or group of users in the organization, right? So that's one. And of course, by having exclusion, you can set certain exclusion, right? I mentioned about exclusion of files. You think that you don't want to create false positives, you can actually put it here so that it will ignore all these files, and then it will just go through making sure that they detect only those real ones that is infected by malware. So this is one of the exclusion place that you can actually put in. And other things that you can also manage to look at is the ability to control certain things, like if I want to put in a certificate, right? So in this case, it's a self-signed certificate from Veeam. But if there are certain global or organization certificates that you need to make sure that we encompass that in terms of ensuring the host responds to this, we can install that valid certificate. And do take note that we also support FIPS 140-2 encryption modules compliance. So if any of the customers like yourself require certain certification, we can actually use and turn on the encryption module. Okay, and of course we can also put in audit logs location so that we can store any audit logs for forensic study or analysis later on. And besides, sending, through email and all that, how about security events that you encounter in the Veeam backup and replication infrastructure, right? We can actually forward all events into a SIEM or syslog server. Now, in this example here, I actually entered a particular IP address, which is actually my Splunk enterprise server. So I pipe all my security events and metadata into Splunk so that it will be collated by the Splunk app and shows you exactly what's happening from your Veeam backup and replication infrastructure. Okay, the other thing about configuration backup, right? I do know that a lot of you may be using Veeam. Please take note that for best practices, most of the time we recommend that you keep a copy of your configuration database somewhere else other than the Veeam backup and replication server, right? You copy out to some secure location that you can use to do this, so that in the event that you need to recover a Veeam backup and replication server, all right, you can actually install using a fresh installation, and then you can actually use the previously saved configuration database for restoration, and everything will be kind of bring back, and you can do the rescan of your repository, your servers that or the host that you are backing up from, right, for example, and then you can actually perform the same thing as if that you can restore and perform data protection from then onwards. And of course, the other thing about configuration database is also to include passwords in order to encrypt your configuration database and make sure that you have the password. If not, we will not be able to decipher any encrypted password on the encrypted configuration database itself, right? So that's the main configuration settings that you can actually use. So I cover on credentials, user roles as well, malware detection, global exclusion for malware detection, and as well as this configuration backup. Now let's look into very specifics on the actual work that we have for 12.1. As you can see here, one of the things that readily occurs is a malware detection section, right? So I did a particular import of a database. I'm actually triggering a malware response to this. So when during the import process, the system recorded that this is a suspicious known malware extension in the file, one of the files that I have. So you can actually go in and kind of look at the files. But before even you do this, right, we give you ability to scan this particular backup that I imported. So you click the scan backup, right? You can choose to scan that particular backup from a antivirus engine. So by default, we have provided 6 antivirus scanners in the product, as part of our show backup and secure restore. So you can actually use this and power up in the sandbox environment and using any of those AV scanners to scan. Or if you know that you are compromised by a certain malware strains, for example, you can actually include some of the Yarrow rule scan script into the BBR server, and you can scan potentially for a particular malware strain, right? So, and this is something good if you know potentially that there is a threat that exists in the environment, for example, like Lockbit and so on, that could be used to actually destroy or even compromise the environment. So you can actually use the Yarrow rule scan to perform this. So this is one of the options that we include in 12.1, right? So if you think that is clean, you just have to mark it clean, or you can show the history that something basically is there, and you can double click to say that, oh, yeah, when I did this from a import process, actually I found a particular file with a Ludicrous extension in it. This could be something that's infected in my system, right? And all this is done by our entropy inline analysis, even during the import process, right? Not just purely from a backup perspective. And because we also turn on the file system analysis as well, we also look at certain files that may be suspicious in nature so that we can trigger a response to it. Okay, so that's for malware detection. Right, from a job itself, you can see that we also have a show backup. So show backup basically gives you a good way to manage things like you want to make sure that anything can be recovered once you've done the backup. This could be like maybe months ago, and you want to perform a backup verification, which I select here, and perform a content scan only. Now, do note that show backup is a feature in functionality that we have introduced even before version 12, right? And the reason for doing this is to make sure that whatever you backed up as part of your 32110 rule, the zero meaning that from a backup perspective, anything that needs to be verified block by block can be used to recover your applications or your VM. So in this case, you can choose either full recoverability testing, or you use a backup verification just to look at the backup integrity check and its content analysis, which we can use again the AV scanners as well as the Yarrow scan to perform this. So in this case, I'm actually using just my AV scan because I treat my Postgres server as an important application that I need to recover should anything happen to this particular server, right? In normal production time, I can use a previous backup securely checked before even published back to the production. Now, the good thing about Sure Backup is you can actually process a list of VMs for verification, right? And we can choose a random how many machines or VMs that we choose to perform a verification. So if you have a job that has about 10 or 15 VMs, for example, right, the Sure Backup will pick randomly all these VMs for backup verification and integrity check, as well as a AV or Yarrow scan if you need to recover them. So this is something that we introduced in version 12. And of course, you can actually continue to scan or perform, the backup integrity check, right, and verify. Because if you run that, it's going to take a pretty long aspect of this, right? And of course, you can send like any other options out there. We can actually send information to a email or notification to a syslog server and SIAM, right? So again, this is something that we introduced in version 12.1. Another feature that we included in 12.1 is the analytics feature, right? So this is something we included as a dashboard, a threat center dashboard. So I'm going to load this just to show you basically how it looks like, right? But of course, before we run this, let me just show you the actual screens which can be used for this purpose. Right, the track dashboard is something similar in this. This is in Veeam 1. So it shows you the scorecard based on environment, which I'll come back to you on the security and compliance analyzer. It shows you basically if there is infected restore point on the right side, where is it residing, whether it's in Singapore, it's a location, or somewhere else. And it also shows you anomalies as well, right? Anomalies that may occur. For example, in this aspect, I have not performed a backup for my Azure VM for like a week, right? So it does trigger a alert and response accordingly. And let's go back to the Veeam itself. Maybe it takes a bit of time. Yeah, so this is the same scorecard that you saw earlier on, right? So the same screen applies on the Veeam Backup and Replication Server. It can be configured on the Veeam 1 solution itself. And not only we provide threat center for malware detection or compliance based on what you've done for backup infrastructure, we also give you an overview of your backup infrastructure as well. Things like, the inventory of your VMs, your hosts, your jobs, your protected VMs, how are they doing on a daily basis or weekly basis, right? As well as looking at a heat map on your respective components like repository, proxy, or even the usage, right? So sometimes you may think that, oh yeah, because my proxy may be heavily loaded, it could be due to a lot of activity there, all right? One of the things that you probably notice is when a threat actor decided to perform a malware trigger event, for example, the backup proxy will always spike pretty high. All right. So jobs calendar gives you a ability to see how all your jobs in the system. If you know that the certain jobs are not there, that means somebody must have deleted the job again. If somebody wants to delete a job, you need a secondary approval to perform this. Right. So I'm going to go back to the scorecard. Now, how do we actually look at the platform security compliance in this mode? So if I go back to home, you see an option called security and compliance. So if you click this, it gives you an analysis of 30 best practice points that you can actually look at. Now, this actually brought forward from our previous version 12, best practice analyzer. So now we include the security settings in it. So some of them may not apply to everybody. So you can, suppress them, or you can set it to say that I pass this because I don't really need it, or I already done it. But it does differ very different in every organization. So just make sure that the settings there can be complied or not complied depending on the settings that you have done. And of course, when you click on analyze, you can analyze this. You can actually set a different schedule to run the different time of zone to do this, and you can send to the respondents as well. Right? This is a good feature to kind of look at the best practice across the board, and that will also affect your scorecard that I mentioned early on from the analytics point of view. Okay, so that's to make sure. So in my test environment, I only have 12 that's complied, or 19 or 31 settings are there, and of course the other 12 might need a bit of adjustments to make sure that I comply to them. Right. So moving back to Veeam 1. So this is a Veeam 1 client that you can actually deploy using our advanced edition. All right, you can change the dashboard. You can actually look at things you want to include in the dashboard so that you know exactly what you're monitoring, right? I'll look into the reports later on to see how you basically can do that. And you can change the report accordingly, right? You can customize the report based on the environment. Out of the box, we have close to about 150 reports that you can customize and making sure that you work in the environment. And we provide 350 alarms and alerts that you can customize as well, right, to perform this. And you can run the reports by just putting in your scheduling, right? You can include a certain report, like you run certain reports to check your anomalies every other day, maybe to run after the backup, or you can check your infrastructure, how it does, for the week. Do I need to increase my capacity, right? We can actually use that from a capacity planning standpoint as well, right? So that's the threat center that I mentioned. One of the other thing that we also included is the ability to customize, settings to include all your virtual infrastructure. So in this case, I do have if I click on virtual infrastructure, I do have a VMware ESX host. I also have the Hyper-V host that is included, so that I basically can look at a total view on my host status, my data store, my virtual machine status, if whether it's healthy or not, or is there an error that occurs. In this case, there's an alarm that was triggered to say that, my particular host is not um, activated, or I use too much of CPU cycle. I can do that as well. From a Veeam backup and replication, we can also look at what's happening here, right? Besides the graphical aspect on the system itself, for example, like how many repositories are in there, which other repository needs to be looked at, if the capacity is full or nearly full, and then where are those repositories being hosted, be it whether it's on-prem, like our Vim hardened repository, which has immutability state, so that we can actually back up using a Vim hardened repository to be immutable, or we can actually write to or back up to Azure Blob, or to external, S3 compatible object storage, which has retention object lock built into that, so that you do not allow threat actors to randomly just go in and remove the entire backup data, right? So in this example, I have Wasabi set up as a scale up backup repository. So it tells me basically how am I doing it, where is it residing, and what's the storage consumption, so forth, right? As you can see, I only use about a certain number of space. Now, besides the Veeam backup and replication, from a setting standpoint, you can also look at the Veeam, if you have a Microsoft 365 environment, using the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365, we can also, monitor them and provide alerts should anything happen to the Microsoft 365 environment. Okay, so that's Veeam 1. And of course, you can change certain alarms. In this case, I'm actually configure alarm specifically for malware, which I can use to look at potentially should anything happen to my, let's say, host or my application, I can trigger a response to it, right? For example, in this case, I actually send all the logs directly from the backup aspect of it to my syslog or SIAM server, so that the organization cybersecurity analysts can actually look at it and act upon it, right? From a view of a cyber threat situation. And we actually provide mitigation aspect to it, so that you can actually do automatic, mitigation tasks, or even response to any situation. For example, if a VM is compromised, you may want to straight away, disable the network cards in order for not able to, for the VMs to be running, so that you will infect any other environment in the host or the virtual infrastructure. Okay, this is just basically one of the things that we can do. Now, switching on from Veeam 1, I'm going to show you Veeam Splunk app. So let me just switch the screen, and I'm going to trigger on my Splunk app. Right, so this is a Splunk um, Veeam app for Splunk. You can see here that I have a Veeam Data Platform monitoring, so I can look at maybe the last hour or so, or in real time. If something happens, right, I can actually change it. So all this has been customized for the user. So once you deploy, if you got a Splunk environment, right, this is something that you have redone by Veeam, so you don't have to basically look at it. So I don't have anything in real time, and I want to, let's say, do relative for today. It will be automatically triggered. There's no results. Maybe 30 days, like the last 30 days, right? So just give you a example of what's being triggered from the system. So you can see that I have 12 failed jobs because I didn't perform anything on the last few weeks. So you can see a certain information that will be displayed here, and then and the security analyst can actually look at it in detail, right? They can click and then look at the job that is failed. So in this case, I have done one this morning that has a certain fail state. So I click that and we show you the detail as well, right? So if you look at the security events, same thing, all right? Some security events can occur, right? For example, I did have one marked as suspicious because I imported a database. So that one is about less than a minute ago. That was reference from the threat center from Veeam as well as a Veeam backup and replication server, right? And if you click on the security events, right, you can actually go and look at what encompasses on a security event. Very detailed, right? Yeah, a lot of security information coming from the VBR server, coming from a Veeam backup replication server, as well as the Veeam server itself, so that you can correlate, right, and aggregate based on the information that you collect in Splunk, right? Now, besides the security events, I also have the ability to generate reports, right? So in this case, I have a certain reports that I already done up. So it's like, for example, multi-factor authentication on my Veeam backup and replication server, where somebody, sign in, who's the user who signed in, any jobs that last 24 hours or job that did not complete, for example, can be done as well. Or even 4 eyes events, somebody logs on and submit a request to delete something, right? And of course, a secondary backup administrator comes in and approve or reject them. I can also view that as well, right? All malware detection events from backup, import, scans, from the post backup situation, you can actually do that as well, right? So this is the reports that I can customize, and you can create your own reports. If you need those additional reports, you can actually do that. And of course, from an alert standpoint, there's quite a host of alerts that is provided in the Veeam app. And I actually, in this particular demo, I have enable one of the alerts, like attempt to delete a backup fail, right? Or even, let's say, if a backup repository, somebody tried to meddle with the backup repository or trying to delete a repository, for example, this will be alerted in the Splunk app. Okay, so this gives you a quick overview of the security and ransomware capability that's found in Veeam 12.1. So moving back to my slides. So I've demoed some way to reinforce the security posture. We are able to detect and identify certain threats. One great example is just now you saw a malware detection that was enabled, and of course you can perform respond and recover, right? You can choose any of recovery options that you need to do that. And of course, the Splunk app with a stronger threat detection as well. Now, moving back to the same slide, I do encourage you to look and download the data trends protection report, right? It gives you a whole list of other things other than ransomware. But of course, at the end of it, there's always a summary to talk about where we, in terms of 2024 and moving forward, what are the customers are looking at in terms of mitigating any risk, or even moving away from a certain form of modernizing their data protection scheme and strategy as well. And last but not least, right, we do have quite a fair bit of Veeam cyber resiliency ecosystems. One of the new ones is by Cofware. You happen to read a lot on Cofware, right? This is a new acquisition that we done about a couple months ago. So this organization that we acquire has specialized in cyber incident response and extortion capabilities. And besides all that, you can see there's quite a fair bit of resiliency ecosystem that we included. Things like immutable backups, snapshots, working with a lot of vendors out there. And because we do not have a vendor locking per se, so customers like yourself can choose right on selecting the vendor of choice to work with the same um, security and ransomware capabilities that I mentioned early on. Okay, that's ends my So I've just probably show you what I have in terms of today's sessions. So some of the solutions there and vendors are already in place to support the security and ransomware capabilities from Veeam, right? You will see some of the incident response like incident API used by some of the vendors, and we include quite a fair bit of AV scanners into our secure backup and secure restore capability as well. All right, I just finished my demo and my presentation. So let's look at questions. Okay, so one question is, does the Veeam one require special license? So that's a very good question. So we do have packages. So do take note that early on when I share about this, uh, the solution itself, right? The main product for backup and recovery is our Veeam backup and replication solution. So that's the foundation pack that we allow customers to deploy. Now, if you want a monitoring and analytics with backup and replication services or data protection, right? We do have an advanced package. That advanced package includes licenses for Veeam 1, right? Typically, it will also gives you the ability to say, oh yeah, okay, if you want to monitor Veeam backup and replication, or even VMs from your virtual infrastructure, it is included in the advanced edition package, right? So the third one, which is the recovery orchestration, which is our premium package, right, includes all the three products. So the Veeam recovery orchestrator, the Veeam One product, as well as Veeam backup and replication server. Right. I mentioned about the security features that you saw earlier on. All these are already in place in the flagship product, which is our backup and recovery replication server. So when you deploy this using job.1, right, do take note that for inline scan and inline scan, you can use that for all your backup from there onwards. But do take note that for Yara rule scan, it requires a advanced edition, right? And requires some form of understanding for Yara as well. Yara basically is a used by the malware researchers to understand the kind of malware strain that is in the wild, right? And there's quite a fair bit of Yara rule script that you can actually get from security vendors, as well as from GitHub. All right, so there are security researchers that provided some form that you can customize in your environment, and you can actually upload into your Veeam backup and replication server. So there's another question. So one question, is it correct that setting MFA only protects access to Veeam console? Yes, it is only that. In the future, you'll see more MFA being introduced in our other products as well. All right, so they can do a secure access or even lockdown should any of the situation be compromised. However, it will not be able to protect from ransomware encrypted repositories at OS level, exactly. Yeah. So if any privilege situation occurs even before you turn on any security settings on your Veeam backup and replication server, right? We do not, again, I said, we do not, protect from any situation outside of Veeam infrastructure. If they decided to compromise, let's say your backup infrastructure that is loosely being, set up, right? That should already been done through your XDR or your perimeter defense or whatever that you set up from a typical organization security. Do always take note that the Veeam backup and replication or data protection requirements or needs is always the last line of defense. Very good question. Thank you. And there's another question. I'm not using Veeam backup and replication enterprise. If I want to use Veeam One, do I need to add additional license? Unfortunately, that question do surface many times, right? The Veeam One works with our closely with our Veeam backup and replication server, right? Even though they can run and monitor directly on managing your virtual infrastructure, monitoring it, and provide alerts. But the packaging only currently comes with the advanced edition from the Veeam Data Platform. That means you need to buy both the Veeam backup and replication server as well as Veeam One. Okay, let me check. Is there any other question? If you want to know more about Veeam Data Platform, right, whichever country you're from, whichever location you're from, please reach out to your local reseller or a local Veeam contact, right? They should be able to provide some information and, the same demo that I show you, right? You can actually use that information for your own consumption so that you can deploy some of the security and ransomware capabilities that I mentioned earlier on. Right, I'm just looking at any other questions. If not, thank you again for your time. Thank you for participating and attending today's webinar. But if you have any questions or comments or feedback, do provide some contact so that you can reach out to your local reseller and a local Veeam contact, right? And we will probably get in touch with you. Uh, thank you again for attending and have a great day ahead. Bye bye.